The first website in this video that we'll get to is auction.com. Auction.com is one of the largest out there and probably one of the best ones in my opinion. I check it multiple times a day and it really is a good resource. You may be familiar with it already. If you're not, it's a wonderful resource. Probably the first one to get started on. I'm in North Carolina, so we'll search North Carolina, and it's really easy to operate. You can just search where you want to, just like most MLS or Zillow or Trulier services out there that most people are familiar with. You got your map on the right, can click on that. You also just got your traditional list view on the left, and you'll kind of see in here, you'll see the address if it's vacant or not. You can also download an app on your iPhone, or you can sign in and log in and save them up here, so they'll send you daily reminders, weekly reminders, however you want to do it. Especially if properties you save, they'll kind of update you if something's happened, if it's been delayed, if it's been canceled. But bank online, that means that bank has already taken it back, and this is just an online auction. We'll get into that in another episode, but this one right here is a foreclosure sale in person. This is really what I'm looking at initially to start with when I'm on this, is find the foreclosure sales in person, which are the ones at the courthouse. Bank on online. We'll just click on this one, even though it's probably not the best property in the world. We'll click on this one and show you a little bit about what a traditional listing looks like. All these, the estimated resale value, rental estimates, they're just computer generated, come from Zillow, Trulia, the likes of those. This is really what you want to know: the date of the auction, auction start time, where it's located. It's usually the courthouse and just on the courthouse steps. And this is just a traditional listing of, not a bad looking house actually. And sometimes they'll have opening bid, sometimes they won't. A lot of times you'll have to go in person to find the actual opening bid, but don't rely on this 100%. This is usually accurate, but if it ever gets delayed, they won't really update as much. So it's always good to check your local newspaper. But that's it for the first one, and that's auction.com. Another good foreclosure website is homepath.com. And homepath.com is one that's Fannie Mae backed, so it's kind of a semi-quasi government agency, but this is where a lot of those come up. And the thing about homepath.com is most of them have been already what we call real estate owned. And we'll type in North Carolina. This is just the landing website when you get there, and you can see it works much like any of them, just a traditional kind of listings map look. And what it really amounts to is a lot of these are already real estate owned. They've already gone through the courthouse steps, most of them. And sometimes what you have to look out for in HomePath and HUD Home Storage, we'll get to next, is that sometimes since they're government backed, they'd like to get homeowners back in the home. So they do what's called a 7-day wait period, where technically as an investor you aren't allowed to make a bid on the property in an effort to get a homeowner to make a bid, because they're usually pretty good properties since they're kind of government sponsored back. And these are just typical listings you'll see. Sometimes they're a little bit higher when there's a lot of foreclosures out in the market. This is a great resource, and I bought a handful of properties from this type of avenue. And next we'll go to HUD Home Store, which is very similar to homepath.com, and it's another kind of government-backed agency, which is HUD, and they have equally the same amount of kind of listings, the same kind of thing with a 7-day period, trying to get owner occupants back in them, which is a great thing. But when there's a flooded market of foreclosures, like there tends to be at some times, then investors really can take advantage of that. It's essentially the same thing. Bank-owned properties, for the most part, they've already gone through the foreclosure property, and say a bank or something had it, and then they've given it back to HUD because they're the ones who back them essentially. And this is just another website, and they got a map view you can go to, list view, same kind of thing, just looks a little different. The next website we'll take a look at is homesteps.com. And homesteps.com is very similar to HomePath and HUD Home Store, another kind of government-backed agency that gets foreclosures. They back banks, so they make the loans, and they're the ones that are on the hook for it. So once the bank kind of goes through the foreclosure process, it will become a Homesteps or HomePath property. I think this is the exact same website as the HomePath, just looks a little bit different. Again, we'll just type in North Carolina just for informative reasons, and very same setup. has the same thing called First Look. That's the thing what I'm talking about when it's the 7 days, kind of trying to get a homeowner back in there. I think all of them call it the First Look. And it's a great thing. I mean, if you're actually a home trying to buy it for your personal home, it's a great way to do it. I actually bought my first house like that because I didn't have anybody else to compete with besides other homeowners at the time I bought my first home. It was the perfect scenario because there wasn't that many homeowners looking in the market, so it worked out well for me. Still on that house to this day and rent it out right now. But just not much else to say here except it's exactly like the others, and this is homesteps.com. The next website is hudsonandmarshall.com, and it's also, as you can see here, also called Service Link Auction. I think they just combined them recently. I'm not really too sure. Very similar, but this one is not a government-backed agency. It's more private, kind of like the first one at auction.com. They just get a different set of listings in a way. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of overlap, but this is more for your public auction at the courthouse steps. And I think they do some online auctions as well. As you can see, postpone, auction closed. So that one either happened or never came to fruition. Scheduled, postponed, scheduled. And you will find a lot of these do get postponed the more you start paying attention to foreclosure properties. And they get postponed for a litany of reasons that we can go to in another video. But this is hudsonandmarshall.com or Service Link. I'm not sure the web address, but hudsonandmarshall.com. Hold up, YouTube. Now this is your chance to like and comment and subscribe below. If you will, just hit on those buttons and keep on liking it. I'm sure many of you have been to Zillow.com before. Just about everybody, I think, in the whole world has been to Zillow. I think, and everybody knows everything about real estate now through Zillow. But they do offer some foreclosures, or they kind of aggregate from, public notice addresses and stuff like that. So they do have a way to do it, but it's a little bit more challenging. I just type in North Carolina here in the top left corner, then you go for sell. Click the little drop down menu, and I just get rid of all the buy owner, new construction, auction. Well, I guess you could do auction, foreclosure, or foreclosure is what we want, and then foreclosed and pre-foreclosure. And we'll just hit done. It'll populate our map, and you can see pre-foreclosures. And that means pre-foreclosure is a term when, say, maybe the bank or lending agency has filed some papers against the homeowner to start the process of foreclosure. So it may never go to actual foreclosure. They may just be behind on their payment. But it is a good idea to kind of check your local market and kind of see what's going on, to kind of get a feel of what may be coming up in the future. And when it's actually foreclosed, then, it's already bank owned at that point. But they will say, it's coming up for foreclosure at so-and-so auction. You can't believe every single thing you see on here, but it's a good thing to kind of keep track of. And really know your market, because that's a lot of this, is really understanding your market, where the market's going. And this one that I just pulled up, just try to see what it will show you. It doesn't offer a whole lot besides the basic stuff you'll find on Zillow. But a lot of times they'll say up here, it's coming to auction and so on all the time, but it's not the best one to find the true courthouse foreclosure sales. This is kind of when it's bank owned, I feel like they pick up on it more, but it's a good thing to keep track of. Another lesser known website is exomi.com. Not a government sponsored agency, anything like that. Just your basic, and they have normal MLS on here. You can see buy, sell, you can do whatever. It's kind of a different form of Zillow, I suppose. We'll do North Carolina again. This is auction only. You just have to make sure you click that tab. And they do have commercial ones on here too, which a lot of these, auction.com does own another company called 10X or something that has commercial listings as well. But this one is pretty decent, I think. But I think you'll see a lot more commercial foreclosures here in the near future. So this is something that I'm going to try to start keeping track of a little bit more, and try to find some more websites that actually do more just commercial. But I feel like the majority of these websites are focused on residential, just because the sheer numbers of residential foreclosures versus there's not as many commercial properties in the world compared to single family residential homes, especially in the United States. Typical listing service website. This one also has your bank owned, and then they kind of like auction.com, they'll do their own auctions after that. It may not sell the first time. A lot of these houses, like this one in Smithfield, I know is a flood house, and it's been up for auction a couple of times. It's already been foreclosed on. It's a bank owned property now, but then they put it on here and people can make bids. And also when people make bids on here, you have to understand that a lot of these auction.com and Exomi, they can bid against you. So you may be bidding just against yourself, and you're just bidding against a computer, really. So you got to be a little bit careful with that. But they have bank owned, regular, foreclosed at the courthouse steps, and tells you all the information. Very similar to the rest of them. Hubzu.com is another listing website for foreclosures. They do a lot of bank-owned properties, I've found, and do a lot of timed auctions, so to speak. And they also have a traditional kind of MLS feature as well. And I got to make sure I'm going to the right thing, because it's there we go. Bank-owned, non-bank-owned foreclosed homes. Let's just do all auctions, and we'll do North Carolina again. And you can see they kind of have auction.com, Hudson and Marshall will do this, Exomi will do this, and Hubzu, I think, is probably the leader, or was at a time, with a lot of the bank-owned things. Once it's actually been foreclosed, they don't have as many of the public notices of where you go to the courthouse and actually buy it from the courthouse steps. They have more of your bank-owned properties, and I feel like more and more lending agencies have started to use Hubzu, and I think it's become a little bit more popular, especially through the Great Recession. It seemed to kind of pick up steam then. And these are just your typical bank-owned. This says foreclosure, so they do have some public notice announcements up here for certain counties and stuff like that. But I always found auction.com had more. None of them are perfect. You all have to use a little bit of every single website we're showing you. Kind of keep track of everything. You'll find what works better in your area. Different states may be different things. So that I'm in North Carolina, like I said again. So this kind of is what worked for me, but each state has their own sites that they use more and more. But this is hubzu.com. The last technique that I use a lot to find foreclosures, and it's not necessarily a website, although you can access some stuff through the web, but I always find just traditional newspaper still publishes your public notices, and that's where you'll find notice of foreclosure, stuff like that, pre-foreclosure stuff. Whenever they're going through the court process for the bank to actually repossess the house, or they have to go through the court here in North Carolina. Certain states have different ways of doing it. It depends on your state, but majority it works in a similar fashion regardless. This is the News and Observer. And I couldn't find one up here right now. Not saying there's not. I didn't look that great, but this is where you'll find your mini storage listings, stuff like that. Just your public notice of, there's a hearing happening and this is what's going to happen. Just to show you, I found one on a little more localized paper, and this is kind of what they usually look like. And an actual newspaper is the best. It's a little bit harder to keep track up with them online, in my opinion. But if you actually have a printed newspaper there in the back of there in the classified sections, and it'll be a section called public notices, and they'll have litany of different things. But this is, generally speaking, you'll list address or tax ID number, the date they're planning on selling it, and this is where all the information that all these websites they usually come from this, and it'll tell you all the plat book, everything else, the legal, the legal history of the house. So the plat book would be actually the way it sits on the lot, and you can go to the register of deeds and find all that information. You can either find their promissory note in our state or deed of trust, book 25885, and you can pull that up and look at it. And then once you look at it, you can actually get a general idea of how much you think that they may owe on the property at this point. And then we'll get to that in another video. But this is just wanted to kind of really show you what a traditional one looks like, no matter where you are in the country. They'll look a little bit different, but in North Carolina, this is how they all generally look, and tell you the date and time, everything else, and kind of what's going on with it. It's a great resource, and the newspaper by far is still the best way to kind of really see it, because they all usually have to go through the newspaper. And also, not just the newspaper, but if you actually go to your courthouse at a certain, they have a board somewhere, and you'll just ask if you walk in the courthouse and just tell them what you're doing, looking for where they have post public notices. They'll have a board with all these on there, and they'll keep them updated, and that really is the best source ever because that comes straight from the source. I usually try to make a habit of going in there. I'll have some business in the courthouse, and I'll just take a picture of them hanging on the wall, and then I'll come back and research them. And there's a good way when one gets delayed and it's not necessarily put through the paper again, or it may not. When they get delayed, a lot of weird things happen. So that's how you really can get some good deals on properties. Is you have to stay current with it and go to the auction. If it gets delayed, then go find out when. Usually when it's delayed, they'll tell you right then when the next one is, and keep looking at the board, and they'll keep updating them when it is because they legally have to do it. They have to announce when they're going to sell it. So that is a really, really good way, and that's the one I wanted to finish on because that's the best way, in my opinion, is keep involved with the courthouse. Go and look on their public notice wall, and then read the newspaper at the back of the page. Usually in the classified ads, it's on the public notices, and just keep a track of them. Cut them out, put them on your calendars when they're going to be, and really start to figure out what's going on. And I would watch them for a while, go to a couple, get your feet wet, and then really start, when you get comfortable, start bidding on them. And we can talk about bidding in another video, but this is the best one in my opinion. And it's not a website, but it's your traditional newspaper. Please hit that like and subscribe button below. And if there are any websites that you think I missed, please leave a comment.